everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Work is Rigged. Now, this episode is a continuation of the first episode where we chatted with Kaci Muecke, the founder and coach of Imperfectly Empowered, where she helps neurodivergent women navigate everything from burnout to career pivots and more. And a lot of it is based on her own story, which you can listen to if you hop back over to episode 1. But we have a lot more topics we're going to cover, starting with one of the most important conversations about unmasking and how it impacts you in the workplace. So without further ado, let's jump in.
And I'm glad you brought up unmasking because that's such a huge topic as well. So many more people now, more than ever, are getting diagnosed in their adult life. And that is crazy. I imagine that to be very similar to someone coming out as queer, for example, late in life. You've lived your entire life with one idea of who you are, and you've never really had the chance to explore, these other areas. You've never given yourself permission, or you never had permission from the people around you. And all of a sudden, you are looking back at your entire life and reassessing and reframing absolutely everything. And while you're doing that, it is not uncommon to deal with things like skill regression, things that you were once able to do because you were drawing energy from an unsustainable source, which would eventually lead to burnout, are now inaccessible to you. And, it changes the way people around you interact with you, their opinions of you. A lot of them are gonna be like, you weren't like this before. Why are you like this now? And stuff. Like, I don't know. Does any of this sound like your story?
Yeah, I was, I think, 31 when I was diagnosed with ADHD. When I brought it up to my doctor, she basically said that there's a good chance I didn't have ADHD, and she didn't really want to give me the referral because I had a master's degree and a successful career.
Yeah.
And I had to ask her for one anyway, which she thankfully did give me, but she literally wrote in my medical chart, if this person has ADHD, is compensating well. And I was not compensating well. I had at one time, but I was coming to her because I was really, really struggling. And like that change in identity, it helped me understand myself and give myself grace about certain things that were challenging and made it make sense about why those things were hard for me. And it was also something that I really wish I understood much younger and could have just reframed a lot of things that I did as I was growing up and as I was going through my career in a way that I just wasn't able to. So,
Absolutely. I
yeah,
mean, like for me, I remember in high school being like horribly depressed, like not diagnosed, but I knew there was something wrong. But
same.
at the same
Yep.
time, I beat myself up constantly because I knew I had a good life. I knew my parents loved me. I had great friends. I was in an art school. I was doing music every day. Why did I feel like garbage? And then, of course, the idea of being neurodivergent never passed my mind because why would I think that?
hmm
I'm functioning. I'm still getting A's and B's in school. So maybe I'm just ungrateful. Maybe I'm lazy. It's toxic and it really impacts like your ability to function as like a human being. And so I'm so glad that so many more people are getting this addressed in adulthood, but it does present some very unique challenges. When we're adults, we have more on the line. We have mortgages, we have kids, we have reputations to uphold if that's important to you. And so sometimes skill regression feels like it comes at a huge cost. So I guess my question to you, Kaci, is do you feel like unmasking was worth it?
Oh my gosh. Yes. It was hard. It was really hard. I will own that all day long. And it was not something that happened overnight. I mean, it's still a work in progress, but it has been years of me working through this whole thing. But to get to where I am now, I'm the most authentic version of myself that I've ever been. I think I still have a lot of room to grow, and it's something that I'm going to continue working on. But knowing that I can be that much more myself is so freeing. It's so validating, and being able to share my story with other people. I also am a parent to a neurodivergent child, and it has really helped me do that differently in a way that I know I wouldn't have that experience and that perception without having gone through it myself in a very different way. Because, like you mentioned, And I think this is really common, especially with women. I had anxiety and depression, and I thought that was the issue. And I didn't realize that, especially on the anxiety side, close to when I got my diagnosis, that was coming from work. That was coming from the challenges with my ADHD, not me as a person being anxious. And taking the break that I took, which I know we haven't really talked about that yet, but that was the best decision that I ever made. And it was 100% what I needed to get through that phase of life for sure.
For sure. And you know what? I think that we can take this moment to kind of acknowledge that you and I have had a certain amount of privilege that a lot of our listeners might not necessarily have at this point. I'm about to ask you about your ability to take a break, but I'll start off with mine first, because as much as I've been able to start this business and build things up, I always am so aware of the fact that I have a lot of privilege that other people don't have that probably determined my ability to make it out of burnout. People who don't have a support system, who don't have the resources or the tools, they might live in an isolated place. It can be a lot harder, but I think that's why it's even more important for people like you and me who have, it's not easy for us, but we have the means to get there. And then from there, we reach down a hand and we say, hey, let's bring everybody else with us. Let's try and make things a little bit easier for the people who didn't have the resources that we had or anything.
No, I totally agree. There is definitely the privilege of having a supportive partner. Like you mentioned, my partner, he is the reason that I took a break. I would have never given myself that permission on my own. I had just joked, I'm like this close to quitting and working at a coffee shop. And he was like, okay, do it. And then I was like, wait, you mean that? I need to think about that for a second. And that is ultimately what I did. And 100%, there are a lot of people that wouldn't have the opportunity to be able to take a break and make the kind of money that I was making at the coffee shop, working part-time. That is what I did though. And it is exactly what I needed. On the flip side of that, it was absolutely terrifying. I was so afraid of making that leap and people judging it and not understanding why I was going that direction, especially because from the outside, I did look very successful. And I was on paper. The jobs were good. I was making good money. And they're like, what are you doing? But
Mm-hmm.
when you are in the thick of it and you are working, a high pressure job or something that just takes so much of your energy, it is extremely difficult to try to, number one, find time and energy to job search or to do this sort of energy audit that we were talking about and
Yeah.
figure out what makes sense. And I had never had the opportunity to just pause and think and say, wait, what does make sense for me? What do I like? Where do I want to go for here? What are my options? So that's what it took for me, was finally taking that break.
And I kind of want to get into that when you went from a high paying, corporate job that was very mentally demanding, possibly physically demanding to a certain degree. And then you move to such a different environment where you are literally taking orders, serving coffee, on your feet all day, having to memorize the orders and things like that. Can you take me through what that shift felt like?
At first, it didn't feel great, honestly. I mean, I was excited that I got the job. I remember even being nervous that they weren't going to hire me at the coffee shop. But when I finally got going and I was able to have some time to rest, my body felt so much better. That anxiety really started to fade away. I also had a lot come up though, because I was then having the opportunity to process things that I just hadn't, because I really was living in survival mode. It was just compartmentalizing, work is work, and I go and I just do it and I have to. So when I didn't have to do that, that was really tricky. And the emotional side of it was admittedly really hard for me. Like I said, my partner is super supportive. Financially, we were in an okay place, but it was really hard for me to be sitting at home doing nothing because it made me feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not contributing the same as my partner. I'm not contributing in the same way that I was. And it's it's not easy to switch to being a really high achieving person and then allowing yourself to take a break and rest if you haven't done that before. Really challenging, really challenging. But the coffee shop job felt really good in a different way. I was definitely on the older side of the people working there. I had a lot of high schoolers that I was working with. Um, and I just kept saying the phrase in my head, like, I'm working at a coffee shop with a master's degree. It just like blew my mind that I was doing that. And it was
Mhm.
so interesting, but I wouldn't trade it. I definitely wouldn't trade it. I'd do it all over again for sure.
So it's interesting, again, how I said earlier, like you look back on your life and you're just reassessing all of these things that, seemed like, oh, maybe it was just a quirk or maybe it was just like normal or something. And then you look back and you realize where that actually came from. Did you ever
Hmm.
have any instances like that where you like look back at your life back in school or whatever and you're like, oh, that's where it was?
Yeah, for sure. My mom has joked my whole life about me being a procrastinator and
Mm,
liking the pressure of something being due really soon. She hated
mm.
it and she thought that it was just wild that, I would write a 10-page paper the night before it was due. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
had no idea why. I could not figure out why, but I procrastinated on everything. And I would get it done, but last minute. And I didn't know what executive function was at the time. I didn't know anything really about ADHD when I was a kid. But that was a big one for me. I played a ton of sports. And at the time, I didn't
Mm.
know that meant anything, but I think that it's really what my body needed. And I can't imagine what I would have been like had I not played sports my entire life and had practice every single day. What would I have been like at home?
I know, right? We would have just been bouncing off the walls. I mean, I told you I was in music school all throughout high school, and I honestly do think that being a voice major all throughout high school saved me because I was forced to sing every day, and that's like some dopamine stuff right there. But it was like, it was so regulating.
True. I paint as a hobby, and that
Nice.
is truly some of the only time that there aren't other thoughts in my head. There's
I
always
know.
something I am thinking about, always, always. But if I am painting, I can go 2 hours and not realize that 2 hours have passed, and all of a sudden be like, oh my gosh, I haven't been sitting here like worrying about something. I was just painting for that same reason. It's almost like a fidget and a creative outlet in one, right?
It is. And, it's no secret that most neurodivergent folks, or at least most of the ones that I come across, are very creative and
Mhm.
would love nothing more than to do art and express themselves. But the world we live in right now is so hard for creatives. It's like if you want to be a creative person, you're going to have to monetize it because there's no other way that you can live without either monetizing it or only doing it maybe an hour a week because you're so burnt out from doing your full-time job. And so it can often feel very damning for people who don't feel like they were built for the corporate life or the hustle or the grind or anything.
I definitely do the monetizing part for sure. So many people now are trying to do like side hustles and hobbies, which I think is cool that there's the opportunity to at least try to do something with part of your time.
Mhm.
But the idea that we have to do that on top of a full-time job or on top of full-time parenting is kind of insane. The
Yeah.
world right now is already so much that we're having to work the way that we do and put in the time and energy that we do. That how sad is it that we have to spend our extra hours doing something we like, but then time on top of that to try to sell it or
Uh,
get somebody to purchase it or market it.
and like, remember way back when people were like, oh, like you can put down your volunteering experiences on your resume? No one has that now because guess what? No one has time to volunteer. If you have extra time, you're doing a side hustle and you're trying to make a little bit of extra money so you can pay rent next month. And so
Yep.
that's really like a condition of what the job market is like and what careers are like these days. And I don't mean to be all doom and gloom. Like, it's wonderful that we have the option to do side hustles, but I wish it was just that, an
Mhm.
option, right? And a lot of people don't feel like they have that. And so, if our listeners take away one piece of information from our conversation today, one piece of advice that might help them navigate this crazy world, what would you
Mm.
offer for them?
Um, I'd say the goal shouldn't be to be the kind of person that can thrive anywhere. I would love for everybody's goal to be to know yourself well enough that you recognize the environments that naturally fit you. And that's the way to make it sustainable. Like knowing those things and giving yourself permission to be honest about that. You have to be honest with yourself about what truly helps you thrive. Know yourself well enough so that you can find an environment that makes sense for you.
Really, like, that's part of the reason we're having this conversation, right? Like,
Yes.
we're not just talking about, like, oh, hey, everybody listening to this, if you have ADHD, you need to do step A, B, C, and D. No, because every ADHD person, every neurodivergent person for that matter, needs something different, needs a different combination of things. It goes back to what we were saying before, which was mining your life for data, really getting to know what your strengths are, what your challenges are, what motivates you. Just because you're good at something doesn't mean that it is something that's sustainable for you long term.
And also, even for the things that we might be really good at, like hyper focus, that can be a great strength, but we don't necessarily get to decide when that comes to fruition. I would love to say, hey, yes, let's just turn on that hyper focus mode now so that I could get things done that I need to get done, but that's not how it works. Um, and you kind of alluded to this sort of generic coaching advice that assumes that putting a system in place is just going to solve the problem. And that has not been my experience. I've tried using planners. I've tried different routines that other organized people use, but they didn't work for me because they weren't designed for how my brain works, which is why I've shifted more into caring about energy management than time management. Because if someone tells me you have to write reports at 2 o'clock every Tuesday, that's probably not going to work for me. But if I get to ask myself, when do I naturally have the most ability to focus? I can then match that high energy time with the work that requires the most of me. And that might not be the same type of work as somebody else. Maybe writing reports is really easy for me, right? But being able to prioritize myself and stop asking the question about how do I force myself to work like everyone else and more what conditions make it easiest for me to succeed. So that's something I talk about with my clients a lot too.
For sure. And just for anybody who's not familiar with the work that you do here, can you define the difference between focusing on time management versus energy management?
Sure. Yeah. So time management would truly just be making the most use of your time. So, how many hours do you have in your workday or at home? We could be talking about home systems too, and putting some sort of system in place. So, some people will do block time. There's a lot of different methods for how you can structure your time so that you have a form of a schedule, whether it looks like a normal schedule or not. Energy management is really just thinking about what your capacity is. So when I say energy, I mean, like, yes, are you drained? Are you tired? Um, or what level of capacity do you have? You're the only person that can answer that. So if I try to give you an energy management schedule, that's not going to help because it's not going to be the same as mine. I love taking a nap every day. That works for me, and I get to do that now. But I can't work at night. So when I had calls and stuff that were at 7, it was so hard for me. So being able to just trust what my body's telling me instead of what the clock is telling me, to just listen to what my body's saying about how much energy I have, how much capacity I have to get things done. That's kind of what I mean by the energy management side.
It's not about being able to show up and doing like 110% in every day. Sometimes it's about figuring out how can I show up and maybe give like an average of 70% a day and still manage to fulfill all of my expectations, all of the things that I need to do so that when I go home, I can actually do the things I love. I can spend time with my partner. I can go and do art. I can take dance classes. I can travel once a year. So it's really important to kind of figure out what the end goal is and making sure that whatever your work life is, it is sustainable enough to get you there while minimizing that burnout.
Yeah. I mean, even just spreading out the time, if someone tells me I have to do a certain amount of things on a list, or if I try to tell myself I have to do this list of things in this hour, that is going to be way more difficult than saying I need to accomplish this list by the end of the week. Because that does mean that maybe on Tuesday I have 40% capacity, whatever that looks like. And on
Yeah.
a different day, I do have 110. I will get all of the things done, but I get to decide what that looks like each day, which makes sense. We don't have the same capacity every day. Why would we? That just is illogical, right? So
Yeah.
realistically, listening to the energy that we have when and where we're able to is helpful. Granted, I realize most 9 to 5s, you have to be there from 9 to 5 or 8 to 3 or whatever your schedule is. But energy management in that scenario might look more like, if I know that I have the most focus and energy right after lunch, then I'm going to put my toughest tasks after that if I can. If there's something that I find highly draining, does it feel better for you to get it done right away on Monday, or is it something you want to do last? And only you can decide, but there are definitely things that you can do to sort of accommodate yourself based on your own energy, even in those much more structured environments.
I totally agree with that. And I imagine one of the challenges when it comes to working with neurodivergent clients and figuring out this energy management is something you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, which is confidence. I mean, a
Hmm.
lot of people coming into this, they don't feel confident in themselves and their decision making skills because a lot of times in the past, growing up or whatever, their decisions are often questioned. They're often seen as the wrong thing to do because it might not fit their standard idea of a traditional career path or like a traditional life or whatever, right? Amazing. Kaci, thank you so much for taking the time to share your story and your expertise and your knowledge with our listeners today. You can find Kaci online. She is the founder and coach behind Be Imperfectly Empowered. You can check out her website at beimperfectlyempowered.com, and you can also find her on Instagram. And as for me, you know where to find me. I am the founder and career coach behind Atypical Careers, and we are at atypicalcareers.com. We've got lots of really, really great resources on our website. So go check out the Career Hub, get on our mailing list, and get career resources sent straight to your inbox every month. We've got lots of new things cooking. In the meantime, anything else you want to say, Kaci, before we wrap up?
Yeah, just thanks so much for having me. I really love having these open conversations, and I think it helps everybody. So I appreciate what you're doing here. And yeah, thanks for letting me be part of it.
Amazing. Thanks so much. And we'll see you guys next time on Work is Rigged.